Do you know how much money you need to retire? If you're like most people, you have no idea. You've probably got a rough figure in your head, 1 million, 750,000, a number you half remember from somewhere. But if someone asked you to justify it, to explain how you came to that figure, you'd struggle. So it just sits there, a low-level feeling that we never quite have enough. I've been writing about this topic for many years, and here's what I think. The size of your pot isn't the problem. There's a simpler sum sitting underneath it. Work that out, and the number stops being a fog. It takes about 5 minutes. I'll walk you through it, and by the end of this video, you'll be able to work it out for yourself. One thing about how I'll do it. Wherever the evidence gives a range, I'm going to take the cautious end. I'd far rather you arrived at retirement with more than you need than less. Now, ask this question online and you'll get a lot of confident answers. £1 million. That's not a calculation, it's a round number that sounds like enough. 10 times your salary. But your salary is what you earn, not what you spend. If you've been saving hard, those are very different figures. 2/3 of your final salary. A hangover from when most people had a final salary pension. Most people don't. Every one of those guesses at the size of a pot. Not one asks the question that actually settles it. What are you going to spend? Because retirement doesn't cost a pot of money, it costs an income year after year for as long as you live. The pot is only one of the things that pays for it, and for a lot of people, it isn't even the biggest one. So here's the sum. Take what you'll spend in a year. Subtract the income you'll get whether or not you have a pot at all. What's left is your gap. And it's only the gap your savings have to cover. That's it. 3 numbers. 2 of them you can look up this afternoon. And the third is a multiplier I'll tell you about later. And I'll show you exactly where it comes from because most people use the wrong one. Now, I can't tell you your number. What I can do is show you what decides it, so that when you work it out, or when someone works it out with you, you'll understand every part of the sum. So, what are you going to spend? Most people can't answer this, not because they're careless, but because nobody spends their working life tracking what retirement will cost. So, start with someone else's homework. Every year, an organisation called Pensions UK publishes something called Retirement Living Standards. They sit down with groups of ordinary people around the country and ask what a particular standard of living actually means, not in theory, but in the shopping basket. 3 tiers: minimum, moderate and comfortable. Here are the latest figures published in June 2026 for a couple living outside London. Minimum £22,500 a year. Your needs are covered with a little left over, no car. Moderate, £45,400. More financial security and more flexibility. A car and a fortnight in the Mediterranean. Comfortable, £62,700. More luxuries, a bigger budget for the things you actually want to do. For a single person, those figures are £13,900, £32,700 and £45,400. Now these are a guide, not a verdict on what you personally need. Use them as a starting point and then adjust for your own life. Now, 2 things about these numbers that matter enormously. The first is that these are spending figures, not income figures. What you need coming in is higher because some of it goes in tax. Hold on to that, we'll come back to it because it makes a real difference. The second point to make about these figures is that they exclude housing costs, no rent, no mortgage. They also exclude care costs. So if you'll still be paying for somewhere to live when you retire, that goes on top, and it can be a very large number. One last thing, you may have heard that spending naturally tails off as you get older, that you'll slow down, want less, need less. The UK evidence doesn't really support that. When the Institute for Fiscal Studies looked at how spending actually changes through retirement, it found that better off retirees increase their spending through most of their 70s. For one group, it went up 7% in real terms between 67 and 75. Lower income households were broadly flat. Real declines tended to come only at much older ages. So don't assume your spending will fall. Budget as if you'll spend roughly what you do today. That's your first number. Now the second number. Guaranteed income is money that arrives whether or not you have a pot. It doesn't depend on markets and it carries on for life. For most people in the UK, that means the state pension, and for some, an old final salary pension too. The full new state pension is currently £241.30 a week. Over 52 weeks, that's £12,547.60. Three things you need to check about your own. 1. When it starts. Pension age is somewhere between 66 and 67 at the moment, depending on when you were born. It's mid-transition, so look yours up rather than assuming. And note the date, because that's really important. I'll explain why later. 2. How much money you'll actually get. You need 10 qualifying years to get anything at all. But be careful with the figure you may have heard, that 35 years gets you the full amount. That's only reliable if you had no national insurance record before 2016. If you are contracted out at some point, you may get less. Go to gov.uk and get your forecast. It only takes a few minutes. 3. Whether there's anything else. An old defined benefit pension, an annuity you've already bought, those count too, though the terms vary, so check what yours actually promises. Now, here's what I want you to see about that £12,547. Suppose you didn't have it and you had to buy it. An income that rises with inflation, guaranteed for life, however long you live. On a benchmark published in July 2026 for a healthy 65-year-old, that would cost you somewhere around £258,000. You don't have £250,000 sitting in an account with your name on it. The state pension doesn't work like that. But that's the scale of what it's worth, and I guess you've never once counted it when you added up what you've got. That's your second number. So you've got your spending and you've got your guaranteed income. Subtract one from the other and you've got your gap. The last question is how big a pot it takes to fund that gap for the rest of your life. You may have heard the answer to this. It's the 4% rule. Take 4% of your pot in year one, increase it with inflation after that, and you should be fine for 30 years, which means your pot needs to be 25 times your gap. But there's a problem. That rule came from a piece of American research in 1994 using American market history. And the 20th century was unusually kind to American investors. When Wade Pfau ran the same method on UK market history, the answer came out lower, not 4%, about 3.3%. And 3.3% means your pot needs to be about 30 times your gap, not 25. I'll be straight about one thing. Pfau's UK figure came from a portfolio of UK shares and short-term bonds, and his data stopped in 2010. It isn't a precise answer for a modern, globally diversified portfolio. What it is a cautious benchmark grounded in what actually happened. And for what we're doing here, that's what I want. A crucial factor, of course, is longevity. We don't know how long we're going to live for, but it's safer to assume that you're going to live longer than you expect to. When the UK financial regulator, the Financial Conduct Authority, reviewed retirement advice, it found firms modelling only to average life expectancy. Think about what that means. Roughly half of people live longer than average. Plan to the average and you've planned for a coin flip. So, 30 times. If that turns out to be too cautious, you'll die with money you could have spent. I think that's the better mistake to make. One clarification. That 3.3% is your starting withdrawal. You work it out once on the pot you retire with and then increase that pound amount with inflation each year. You're not recalculating a percentage of a moving number. There's an obvious objection to all this. Shares have returned far more than 3.3% a year over the long run. So why can't you just take more? Because when you're drawing money out, the average doesn't govern your outcome. The order does. Fidelity ran this on real numbers. Start with £1 million. Take £4,000 a month, increasing it by 2% a year. Then apply the actual returns of the world stock market from the end of 2005 onwards. In the order they really happened, that portfolio dropped to £588,000 by March 2009. It recovered and finished at £1.71 million. Now take exactly the same returns and reverse the order. Same returns, same average, every single one of them. That portfolio never once fell below the million you started with. It finished at £2.74 million. Same investments, same withdrawals, same average return. Over £1 million of difference. And the only thing that changed was which years came first. That's why the safe rate sits so far below the average return. You're not planning for the average, you're planning for the possibility that the bad years arrive early, right when you started drawing down. You can't control that, but you can leave yourself room for it. So let's do it properly. Take a couple outside London aiming for the moderate standard, spending £45,400 a year. 2 full state pensions, £25,095. So the gap is £20,305. Now tax, because I promised we'd come back to it. Those Pensions UK figures are what you spend, but money you draw from a pension is taxable income. And here's the awkward bit. The full state pension, as I mentioned earlier, is currently £12,547. The personal allowance, which is what you can receive before you pay any tax at all, is £12,570. That's a difference of £22. So for most people, the state pension swallows almost the entire tax-free allowance. Nearly everything you draw on top of it gets taxed, which means you have to gross up. To actually have £20,305 to spend at basic rate, you need about £25,400 coming in. Multiply that by 30 and the pot you need is around £760,000, not £610,000. That's the number you'd get by forgetting about tax altogether, and it's £150,000 of wishful thinking. Want the comfortable standard instead? £62,700 of spending, same state pension, grossed up the same way, and the pot comes out at around £1.4 million, which tells you something about that £1 million figure. For a couple, $1 million gets you somewhere between moderate and comfortable. It's not wrong, but nobody ever tells you what it actually buys. Now, Here's something that often catches people out. Everything I've just done assumes your state pension has started. If you're planning to stop work before then, and plenty of people do, you've got years with no guaranteed income underneath you at all. Every penny of your spending comes from your own money. Stop at 60 with a state pension age of 67, and that's 7 years of your full spending out of the same pot. For our moderate couple, that's roughly another £300,000 on top. So if you're planning to retire early, work out that stretch separately and add it. It's the single most common way this sum goes wrong. And crucially, tax doesn't come into it. For a couple, the minimum standard is £22,500 a year. 2 full state pensions come to £25,095. And because that sits just under 2 personal allowances, virtually none of it is taxed. 2 people with full state pensions are already above the minimum standard before touching a single penny of savings. That's only true, though, if your home is paid off, because remember, these figures exclude housing. But it tells you something about where the ground actually is. Now, go and do it with your numbers. Before you go, the honest limits on what we've just done. Housing. If you'll still be paying rent or a mortgage, add it. It can be the biggest number in the whole sum. Care. Nobody knows what they'll need. Nobody can budget for it precisely. But leaving it out entirely isn't a plan. Fees. Every pound you pay in charges comes out of the same pot. The 3.3% we used doesn't allow for them. But most important of all, remember that life is uncertain and you need to plan accordingly. A real financial plan doesn't produce one number. It stress tests. What if returns are poor early on? What if your partner dies? What if you need care at 82? What we've done today is a starting benchmark. It's not a plan. And I'd rather you treated it as the beginning of a conversation than the end of one. If you'd like help having that conversation, there's a link below to our Find an Advisor service. It'll match you with an evidence-based planner. The matching costs you nothing, the advisor pays a referral fee and absorbs it, so you pay no more than if you'd gone to them directly. If you'd rather explore this topic further on your own, the second edition of How to Fund the Life You Want, which I wrote with Jonathan Hollow, goes into all of this in far more detail, also linked below. Thanks for watching, and if you found this video helpful, why not subscribe? See you in the next video.